Before the world knew him as a saint marked by wounds and miracles, Padre Pio was simply a man who loved God deeply and carried that love through pain, silence, and faith. His life was filled with mystery, long nights of suffering, and quiet victories that only heaven fully understood. But what few people know is that in the final hours of his life, when his body was weak and his voice almost gone, something extraordinary happened. In a small monastery room, far from noise and attention, Padre Pio received a message from Jesus that would give meaning to all his suffering and offer hope to countless souls who would hear his story. This story invites you into those sacred moments before his death, revealing a message of mercy, trust, and love meant not just for one man, but for anyone who has ever struggled, prayed in silence, or wondered if their pain truly mattered. Padre Pio lay on his narrow bed in the small room of the monastery, the walls quiet, the lamp burning low, the scent of incense still clinging to the air from evening prayers. His body was weak, worn by years of pain, fasting, and love offered to God, yet his spirit felt strangely awake like a watchman at dawn. The night outside was gentle, and the brothers moved softly so they would not disturb him. Padre Pio had lived many years carrying the wounds of Christ in his own body, hearing confessions for endless hours, guiding souls with patience and firmness, and suffering misunderstandings without complaint. Now his breath was slow, and each breath felt like a small surrender. In that silence, as his eyes rested half-closed, a warmth filled the room, not like fire, but like the steady comfort of a heart that knows it is loved. Padre Pio felt a presence before he saw anything. His heart recognized it before his eyes did. The room seemed brighter, yet the lamp did not change. Time felt different, as if it had gently paused. Then he saw Jesus standing near him, not as a distant king, but as a familiar friend, wounded yet glorious, eyes full of mercy. Padre Pio wanted to rise, to bow, to speak, but he could not move. Jesus raised his hand, and peace flowed through the room like a quiet river. Padre Pio felt no fear, only a deep sense of homecoming. Jesus spoke softly, and every word entered Padre Pio's soul with clarity and love. He said, "My son, your suffering is nearly complete. You have shared my wounds, my tears, and my love for souls. Tonight I want to give you a message, not only for you, but for those who will hear your story." Padre Pio listened with full attention, his heart open like a child's. Jesus continued, "Tell them that suffering offered with love is never wasted. Every tear you shed, every pain you endured in silence, every misunderstanding you accepted without bitterness, became light for souls who did not even know your name." As Jesus spoke, Padre Pio saw images, not with his eyes, but within his heart. He saw people kneeling in dark rooms, whispering prayers they thought no one heard. He saw mothers crying for lost children, men ashamed of their sins, young people confused and searching for meaning. Jesus said, "When you sat in the confessional and listened with patience, you were my voice. When you wept alone, you were close to my heart. Many think holiness is made of great actions, but I tell you, it is made of love hidden in small things." Padre Pio felt tears roll down his face, not from pain, but from gratitude. Jesus then placed his wounded hand over Padre Pio's heart and said, "Do not be afraid of death. It is not an end, but a meeting. You are coming to me as a son comes home after a long journey." Padre Pio wanted to answer, to say he was not worthy, but Jesus smiled gently, as if he already knew every thought. "Your weaknesses did not stop my grace," Jesus said. "They made room for it." The room felt filled with heaven. Jesus' voice became even softer, like a whisper meant to be remembered forever. "Tell them," he said, "that prayer changes the world more than they can see. Tell them that confession is not a place of shame, but of healing. Tell them that I am closer to the broken-hearted than they imagine." Padre Pio felt his life pass before him, not as regrets, but as moments of mercy. He saw his childhood, his calling, his long hours of pain, and he understood something deeper than ever before. Love had guided everything. Jesus stepped closer and said one final thing before the vision began to fade. "Your mission does not end with your last breath. From heaven, you will continue to help those who call on you. Stay close to my heart, now and forever." The light slowly softened, the warmth remained, and Padre Pio felt an indescribable peace settle over him. The room returned to its quiet, but nothing was the same. He knew that what he had received was not meant to be kept, but to live on through faith, hope, and love in the hearts of others. As the night moved gently toward morning, Padre Pio rested. Though his voice would soon be silent, the message Jesus gave him would continue to speak. That love offered in suffering saves souls, that mercy is endless, and that those who place their lives in God's hands will never be lost. After the sun fully rose, the monastery awakened gently, yet something unseen had already shifted. Padre Pio, though still alive in body, was now living more in the space between heaven and earth. His breathing was shallow, but his soul felt wide and awake. In that quiet space, memories no longer came as separate moments, but as one flowing story of grace. He remembered the many people who had doubted him, judged him, misunderstood his silence, and even questioned the wounds he carried. Once those things caused him pain, but now they appeared different, almost precious, because Jesus had shown him that every misunderstanding accepted in love had become a prayer stronger than words. In his heart, Padre Pio spoke to Jesus without sound. He asked if people would truly understand the message. Jesus answered not with words but with peace, a reassurance that truth always finds its way to humble hearts. Padre Pio felt shown scenes of the future, not clear like a movie, but gentle like symbols. He saw a young man many years later sitting alone at night, burdened by guilt, watching a simple video or reading a short story about Padre Pio. That young man would feel something stir inside him, something like hope, and he would return to prayer after many years. Padre Pio saw a woman exhausted by suffering, whispering his name with doubt, and feeling comfort she could not explain. He understood then that the message Jesus gave him would travel through time quietly, just as grace always does. He wanted to speak aloud, to tell the brothers what he had seen, but Jesus seemed to ask him to trust silence one last time. Silence had been his companion his whole life, and now it became his final offering. Padre Pio reflected on how many people chase signs and wonders, while missing the daily miracles of patience, forgiveness, and endurance. Jesus had taught him that holiness grows slowly, like a tree whose roots go deep before its branches are seen. He prayed that those who heard his story would not seek pain, but would understand pain when it comes. He wished them to know that suffering does not mean God is absent. Often it means God is very close. As the hours passed, Padre Pio's body grew weaker, yet his heart burned with love for souls. He remembered faces, voices, confessions whispered through tears. He remembered telling people to pray the rosary, not as a magic formula, but as a way to stay close to Jesus and Mary. In that quiet room he prayed the rosary in his heart one last time, each mystery becoming an offering for the world. He felt the wounds in his hands and feet grow lighter, as if they were slowly being lifted from him. He understood that soon he would no longer carry them, because he would be united fully with the one who first bore them. A deep gratitude filled him, not pride, but humility. He knew he had done nothing by himself. Everything had been grace. The room felt filled with unseen witnesses, saints and angels rejoicing quietly. Padre Pio's heart expanded with love so strong it almost hurt, yet it was a sweet pain, like longing finally fulfilled. He whispered again in his soul, "Jesus, I trust in you," and those words felt complete, as if they had always been the summary of his life. He thought of the church, wounded yet beloved, struggling yet protected, and he offered his final strength for its healing. He felt certain now that his life, with all its mystery and struggle, had meaning beyond what he could measure. As time slowed even more, Padre Pio rested in that certainty, waiting not with fear, but with trust, like a servant who knows his master is kind. When the final moment approached, it came without drama, without thunder, without fear. It came softly, like a gentle hand closing a dew. That had been open for a long time. Padre Pio felt his last breath forming, and instead of resisting it, he welcomed it. The room seemed to fade, yet his awareness grew brighter. He sensed Jesus closer than ever, not standing apart now, but embracing him fully. There were no more words, because none were needed. Everything Jesus had told him before was now being fulfilled. Padre Pio felt himself crossing into a light that did not blind, but clarified. In that light, he understood truths that had once been mysteries. He understood how every prayer offered in faith echoes through eternity. He understood how God uses even the smallest acts of love to heal the deepest wounds. He understood that heaven is not far away, but woven into every moment lived with God. As his soul entered that light, he did not forget the world. Love does not forget, it expands. He immediately felt connected to those still walking the earth, especially the suffering and the searching. It was as if Jesus allowed him to feel the cries of hearts in need, not as a burden, but as a mission continued. He realized then what Jesus meant when he said his work was not finished. From this place of union, Padre Pio's prayer became more powerful, more immediate. He could intercede without limits, love without exhaustion. On earth, the brothers discovered his body peaceful, his face calm, marked by a quiet dignity. They knelt in prayer, sensing that something holy had just occurred. News of his passing would spread, and people would mourn, but heaven rejoiced. Padre Pio, now fully alive, stood before God not as a hero, but as a child who had trusted. He felt no need to explain his life, because God already knew every intention, every struggle, every tear. There was only love, endless and complete. And yet, even in heaven, Padre Pio's heart leaned toward the earth. He watched souls wrestling with doubt, fear, and despair, and he prayed for them with urgency and tenderness. He wanted them to remember the message Jesus had given him, that mercy is greater than sin, that suffering has meaning when offered in love, and that no one is ever abandoned by God. Over time, stories would be told, some exaggerated, some misunderstood, but the heart of his life would remain simple. Those who truly listened would hear the same invitation he had lived by: pray, trust, love, and never give up. Padre Pio's presence would be felt in quiet chapels, in hospital rooms, in lonely nights where someone whispered his name with hope. And each time that happened, the message Jesus gave him would come alive again, not as a voice from the past, but as a living truth. Padre Pio's story did not end with his death. It began anew in the hearts of those who dared to believe that God still speaks, still heals, and still calls ordinary people to extraordinary trust. As the story of Padre Pio comes to its close, what remains is not the image of a man lying on a bed in weakness, but the living echo of a soul completely surrendered to God. His final hours were not marked by fear, regret, or confusion, but by clarity, peace, and purpose. That alone carries a message for every heart that listens carefully. Padre Pio's life and death remind us that God does not measure greatness the way the world does. He does not look first at success, recognition, or comfort. He looks at faithfulness. He looks at love offered when it is difficult. He looks at trust that remains even when answers do not come. Padre Pio did not escape suffering. He walked through it with God, and that is what transformed it into light. The message Jesus gave Padre Pio before his death was not meant to stay locked in a monastery room or buried in history. It was meant to reach the tired, the wounded, the doubtful, and the searching. It was meant for those who feel forgotten by God, for those who pray but see no immediate change, for those who carry hidden pain that no one else understands. Padre Pio's life declares that God sees everything. No tear is unnoticed. No silent sacrifice is ignored. No prayer whispered in exhaustion is wasted. Heaven is closer than we think, and God is more involved in our suffering than we dare to believe. One of the strongest truths revealed through Padre Pio's final moments is this: suffering does not mean abandonment. In fact, it is often the place where God works most deeply. Padre Pio carried physical pain, emotional isolation, judgment, and misunderstanding. Yet Jesus revealed to him that these very things became channels of grace for others. This truth challenges the way many people think about their own pain. Instead of asking only, "Why is this happening to me?" the story gently invites us to ask, "How can this be offered in love?" Not all suffering will be explained in this life, but none of it is meaningless when placed in God's hands. Padre Pio's story also speaks powerfully about mercy. Again and again, Jesus emphasized that confession is not a courtroom but a place of healing. Shame tells people to hide, but mercy invites them to return. Padre Pio spent countless hours listening to broken hearts, and in his final message, Jesus confirmed that this work was precious beyond measure. For anyone who feels too far gone, too sinful, or too unworthy, this story stands as a quiet but firm answer. God's mercy is always greater. There is no darkness that light cannot enter when the door is opened, even slightly. Another lesson that shines through the conclusion of Padre Pio's life is the power of hidden faithfulness. The world often celebrates what is loud, fast, and visible. God often chooses what is quiet, slow, and unseen. Padre Pio's holiness was formed in long hours of prayer, silent endurance, obedience, and trust. Many people live similar lives today without knowing it. Parents sacrificing quietly for their families, caregivers loving without recognition, individuals remaining faithful in loneliness or illness.
This story affirms that these lives matter deeply. Heaven is built on hidden love. Padre Pio's peaceful surrender at the moment of death reveals something else that our world desperately needs to hear.
Death is not the enemy it appears to be. For those who trust God, death is not a collapse into nothingness, but a crossing into fullness.
Jesus' words to Padre Pio, "Do not be afraid of death," are words meant for every soul weighed down by fear of the unknown.
Faith does not remove death, but it transforms it. It turns fear into hope, endings into beginnings, and separation into reunion.
The continuation of Padre Pio's mission after death also carries profound meaning.
His story tells us that love does not stop at the grave. Those who live united with God do not disappear. They remain present in a deeper way. Padre Pio's life invites believers to understand that prayer connects heaven and earth, that intercession is real, and that we are never as alone as we feel. When someone whispers a prayer in the dark, heaven listens. When someone calls on God with even the smallest amount of trust, grace moves. In a world filled with noise, distraction, and constant pressure to prove worth, Padre Pio's story gently calls us back to simplicity. Pray, trust, love. Offer what you cannot change. Remain faithful even when results are unseen. These are not weak choices, they are powerful ones. They shape eternity. Padre Pio did not change the world through force or influence, but through surrender. That same path remains open to anyone willing to walk it. The final message of this story is not about Padre Pio alone. It is about you. It is about your struggles, your doubts, your unanswered prayers, and your quiet perseverance. It is about the moments when faith feels heavy, when God feels silent, and when life seems unfair. Padre Pio's life and final encounter with Jesus stand as a testimony that God is working even then. Especially then. Let this story leave you not with admiration alone, but with courage. Courage to pray again. Courage to trust again. Courage to believe that your life, exactly as it is, matters to God. You do not need to be perfect to be loved. You do not need to understand everything to move forward. You only need to place what you have into God's hands and allow Him to do what you cannot. Padre Pio's final breath was not an ending, but a confirmation. God is faithful. Love is stronger than suffering. Mercy is greater than sin. And those who remain close to God, even through pain, will never be lost. May this story stay with you in your quiet moments. May it remind you that heaven is near, that God is gentle, and that your faith, no matter how small, has eternal value.